Welcome to the Andy Staples Show, a special Notre Dame edition. We're going to throw some Alabama in there because Notre Dame did just send an offensive coordinator to the Crimson Tide. And, of course, we're going to rope a guest who doesn't cover Iowa into a Brian Ferentz discussion because that is what we do here. Pete Sampson from The Athletic, welcome.
Good to be here. I can't wait to get into 20. Do you round up if it's 24.9 points per game? Do you round that up, or how is that going to work?
Oh, I don't think you can. I don't think. For those who don't know, Brian Ferentz had his contract amended on Monday, and it's fat. It makes Iowa must-watch football. But we have promised you a Notre Dame centered podcast, and we're going to give you that before we get into the Brian Ferentz discussion.
Are we sure that Notre Dame takes precedent over this? Okay, I mean, I'm just like the inverted pyramid. Like,
it's Notre Dame and Alabama topical podcast.
Exactly. Yeah.
Still, I'm not sure.
Pete has very valuable information to give us about Notre Dame and Alabama. But
no offense, Pete, but
I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, but okay, fine. Let's just get that out of the way, and then we can dive in because I've got a lot of takes to get off on that, and they're probably the same takes as everybody else's. Nothing special, but I think
this is me extending an olive branch to the people who are like, please stop talking about Iowa's offense so much. I'm like, okay, I will give you the Notre Dame and the Alabama red meat, and then we will get into the Iowa offense discussion on the back end. So you can listen and then turn it off. We'll have already played all the ads, and then
I don't think that the people that you're referring to exist. I don't know anybody who wants to stop talking about this.
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of complaints of late, but I can't stop myself, and I'm sorry. It's just how it goes. It's fascinating. All right, Pete, we got to talk Irish though. They just lost their OC and Tommy Rees to Alabama. They're currently looking for another offensive coordinator. The report out today from 24/7 that Brian Johnson, the Eagles quarterback coach, who was the Utah OC, was the Florida kind of OC, but in name only quarterbacks coach because Dan Mullen was calling the plays, but also, all-time great quarterback at Utah, that he's one they've talked to. You and Matt Fortina had a great list the other day with some candidates on there. What do you think happens with this job?
I think there's been a lot more NFL interest in the job than I would have anticipated at the beginning. Just because we don't talk about guys coming down from the league to jump back into recruiting and the NIL era and all that stuff. So that surprised me. I do think, Marcus Freeman's his priorities. One, he wants experience as a play caller, but I think he really wants a good cultural fit in the room. Like Marcus is much more new school in how he deals with players. Tommy Rees is much more old school. Like in some ways, he's a better fit for Saban at Alabama in terms of how he handles players. So I think somebody like Brian Johnson, who's a name that I've heard, I know there's been some contact with Brian Leftwich, which I get is like sort of a preliminary, but
and Byron Leftwich also, I believe, just interviewed with the Ravens. So there's he might just be staying in the NFL.
Yeah, that to me, Leftwich seems more like a guy that wants to stay in the NFL, but like Notre Dame, I'll listen. Brian Johnson has bounced between both Utah, Mississippi State for a minute, and Florida. So
I will tell you from his time at Florida, he was beloved by the quarterbacks in the room, kind of the buffer between them and Dan Mullen, who is probably a little more similar to Brian Kelly or Tommy Rees in terms of coaching style. But the difference was Dan was calling the plays there, but it worked out very well. You saw the development of Kyle Trask throughout that process.
Yeah, and Marcus wants somebody who has a better understanding of tempo offense than maybe what they've had the last few years. Like Notre Dame is not going to jump into a lot of like 4 wide looks. Like they play in northern Indiana, but they played a very slow style of offense. In some ways, I felt like they played kind of more of an NFL style of offense with Rees, where it's a lot of pre-motion shift, which is how Rees liked to play as a player, but it was very slow. It was it felt laborious a lot of the time. And I think that Marcus would like to update that and have something a little bit more, I think, easier on the eyes sometimes.
Well, and the NFL part of it, though, is interesting because Notre Dame has a very good offensive line coach in Harry Heastan, that they can do things because of the quality of their offensive line that look more like an NFL offense. Because a lot of college teams run these different schemes that look very different than what you see on Sundays, because they simply don't have the athletes on the line to pull them off. Notre Dame does. I wonder if this is almost like could this be like a Mike McDonald situation at Michigan, where he was basically on loan to them from the Ravens as their defensive coordinator to prove that he could be a play caller, and then goes back to the Ravens as the defensive coordinator when they let Mike Martindale go. Like, could it be like Brian Johnson? Maybe that's the situation. Like, he could get the job, prove himself as a play caller at Notre Dame, and then hops back to the NFL as an OC.
Yeah, I mean, whoever gets this job, I think is going to look great. I mean, I think Notre Dame fans are not going to miss Tommy Rees at the end of next season, because this would have been Rees's best offense. Whether he'd stayed, with Sam Hartman here, got Joe Alt, Blake Fisher, Notre Dame's 2 offensive tackles, who I think Alt will be a first rounder. Fisher might be. But I mean, that's when you don't have to worry about the edges of your offense, you can do a lot. I mean, that's why that's one of the reasons Sam Hartman came here, is like pro style offense, but also I am not running for my life at all times. So that, you're right. I mean, Notre Dame does not have to accommodate for its offensive line. They leaned into it. If you watch Notre Dame in the bowl game, once the fourth quarter came around, South Carolina could not do a dang thing about it, because Notre Dame was just too good up front.
And South Carolina has some NFL players on that defense, like Zach Pickens. I think can't remember if Jordan Burch was playing in that game, but Nick Emenwari, who was only a freshman this year, is going to be an NFL guy. Like, they had NFL dudes, and Notre Dame was moving the ball easily
on the field. And that's like Fisher and Alt are sophomores. It's not like these guys were seniors who had been in the weight room for 5 years. So it's like they've got a lot of talent coming back, and they got very good by the end of last season with Heastan coaching them.
What can I ask you the same question I always ask you, Pete, whether we're in person or on a podcast? With that offensive line and the fact that Hartman's coming to run the slow mesh at Notre Dame.
No, stop it.
Come on, Warren Ruggiero for OC. Let's do it.
All I want is to watch that.
I removed him from the list. I blame Fortuna for putting him on.
But if they don't, well, they're clearly not going to do it, but what is Notre Dame's offensive ceiling at the skill position players? Because that's like my obsession as it pertains to Notre Dame. Like, do they have young guys coming up that are anticipated to like give them some options now, or or how much is the offensive coordinator going to have to work through that element?
They had to fake their way through the receiver position last year. I don't think that they will this season. Tobias Merriweather had a whopping 1 catch last year. He'll be a sophomore, but they think he's got a chance to play beyond Notre Dame. They have a 4-man freshman class. There's a couple good, Rico Flores and Jaden Greathouse were 4-star prospects. Greathouse played in Austin at Kate Klubnik's high school, so like pretty sophisticated offense he's come out of. And then they got Caleb Smith from Virginia Tech, who they really just need to be a rotation guy. But the receiver position, it's not like it's not a strength of the team now, but last year it was, how do we hide the fact that we don't have material here, or we haven't developed it yet? So it'll be better. And like Drew Pine, bless him. I mean, he's 5'10", maybe, doesn't have a huge arm. If you came open, he could probably get the ball to you. Sam Hartman is throwing you open. And that's a completely different style of offense than what they played last year. I do think like the receivers are not going to know what hits them when spring practice starts, because it's just a totally different style of quarterback play that they're working with.
I thought Mitchell Evans also looked very good in that tight end 1 role with Michael Mayer not playing the bowl game. Like, they're fine there. And I realize this is just one play from a bowl game, and perhaps I'm reading too much into it, but Logan Diggs catching the ball out of the backfield, how about a little more of that? He only caught 10 passes last year. Maybe he should catch a few more.
Are we supposed to be 3 minutes away from me being convinced that Notre Dame's going to make the playoff? Because this is like
we haven't talked D-line yet, so we're
okay. I'm just saying, like, whenever you have a quarterback like Hartman and offensive tackles like that, that's a pretty good recipe for success offensively.
They have not had to beat people with offense probably since 2015. They always been more balanced or defense first. They should be able to outscore people this year. And they might have to because their defense loses quite a bit up front.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that because I was reading your mailbag and I was actually reading your mailbag questions, and you get a lot of questions about the D-line, a lot. Isaiah Foskey, I just saw him in Senior Bowl last week. He's the program leader in sacks all time. He's gone. You got a pair of brothers gone as well. What do they have now to replace all that?
I mean, they picked up an Ohio State grad transfer in Javante Jean-Baptiste, which sounds like a great old French explorer that, fit in with Notre Dame's backstory. So, but they don't have the high talent that they did in the past. There's no replacement for Foskey. So I think the guys they're counting on are Jean-Baptiste. Jordan Botelho had a couple sacks in the bowl game. He's been a rotational player, but was like a 4-star recruit out of Hawaii 4 years ago. Riley Mills is a defensive tackle who I think was on Bruce's Freaks list last year. Mm-hmm. Didn't really do much last season. He needs to take a big step forward. He's like the 3 technique that you wanted to make into a big end, and it didn't work out because he wasn't agile enough. So they'll bump him back inside. But they had a 4-man defensive line class. They're going to need, if you follow Notre Dame, you know who Ben Morrison is. He was a 4-star corner, 6 picks last year. Was rated just outside the top 300, but was a freshman All-American lock. They need a Ben Morrison style story on the defensive line for the defense really to hit the marks that they need.
Is Watts going to be the next great Notre Dame safety?
Great would be a stretch. I think he will be the next good one.
But maybe not Kyle Hamilton
not Kyle Hamilton. Maybe Brandon Joseph plus. That was a transfer they took from Northwestern that didn't really click as much as they thought. He was banged up, but just didn't make the plays that they needed. So the back of their defense has some question marks. Xavier Watts should be good. It wouldn't surprise me if they moved a corner back there just to get more speed on the field.
I am interested because it does seem like a tonal shift, and I don't think they expected to have to replace their OC at this point, but here they are. This idea of Notre Dame playing shootouts, which that could be what they play. And how long has it been since that was the way it looked?
I mentioned 2015. That was like the Will Fuller, Deshaun Kaiser, pro size. That was maybe one of the great offensive lines in college football history. Ronnie Stanley, Mike McGlinchey, Quentin Nelson, Sam Mustafa, Alex Bars. That was your starting lineup.
That's nasty.
All pros, all pros.
Right, exactly.
So it was, but that was it. And some of that had to do with Brian Van Gorder was their defensive coordinator. They had to
outscore people. Yes.
This year, I think their linebackers will be good. Al Golden should be back for year 2. That's sort of warrants watching, see what goes on with the NFL coaching carousel. Is there a DC opening with the Cincinnati Bengals? That's something that Notre Dame's monitoring.
That's right. Lou Anarumo is a hot commodity.
If he moves to Arizona, then that's something Notre Dame's gonna have to look out for. But I think overall, they've been so much better at DC the last few years. I mean, they went from Van Gorder to Mike Elko to Clark Lee to Marcus Freeman. Al Golden is the 4th of those 4 and is pretty good. But they've had great DCs.
It's funny
they're not winning games in shootouts because they have great DCs.
People remember Al Golden's tenure at Miami, and that's all they remember. He was a very good head coach at Temple before that. He was a very good coordinator before. He's a very good coach. And sometimes we just assume if somebody has a failed tenure as a head coach somewhere that they don't know what they're doing or that they just forgot everything. Al Golden is proving, and no, he didn't forget anything.
No, and it's I remember talking to Freeman about this when Al Golden got hired. I asked him about Miami, and he's like, well, who's winning at Miami? And I was like, well, that's kind of a good point. That needs to be a tough spot for everybody. But whether the job description of being the head coach of the Miami Hurricanes versus the defense coordinator at Notre Dame, forget the position titles and the responsibilities. The people you're dealing with are totally different. So it's just a totally different skill set. And I think Al Golden, it was not Lee, Elko, or Freeman, but certainly somebody that you would want back for year 2 if you're Marcus Freeman.
Pete, are you seeing these comments over here?
Oh, this is tremendous. So the real coconut, can Pete make an audio book? I would like to fall asleep listening to him talk. It is a very soothing voice.
Calm app. Yeah.
And then do the one that's 2 down from that.
Malcolm McDonald, voice that would make a Wolverine purr. I mean,
now, Pete, in the Notre Dame space.
The bar is low because these people have to listen to me and Ari every day, and I
Yeah.
sound like someone stepped on a cat. And Ari,
I just get
voice is not very pleasing either.
Inherently annoying, yes.
So, yes, this is, but your dulcet tones are a welcome change on this program
because it also screams rational thought too.
It does.
Like when you're calm, collected, and soothing like that.
When Ari came on the Shamrock, that was one of our most popular shows ever because I think it was such a departure to like calm, dulcet tones.
And Fortuna has a mellifluous voice too.
Yeah.
So if you for those who don't,
look out.
Subscribe to the Shamrock.
Yeah.
It is a great podcast. It's Pete and Matt Fortuna talking Notre Dame.
Is it the last standing team podcast that we have?
I believe that it is. I think we're
that was
we knocked
with
off,
4 to 6 4 to 6 but I said 4 to 6 4 to 6 bit the dust. I was like, man, that's sad, but
we were going to do a live show in Columbus, all 4.
I know we had this all planned out, and
I'm not sure I would listen to 4 to 6 with A and B. I don't think I would listen. I wouldn't subscribe.
4 to 6 with A and B would be a good OnlyFans for an Ohio State football account.
Definitely not.
Good God. Well, you mentioned Pete and the voice sounding relaxing and analytical and like the voice of reason.
Mm-hmm.
I think Pete is a good way to describe your voice. I feel like that's necessary as a Notre Dame beat writer sometimes because they have there's a large faction of the Notre Dame fan base that is extremely rational, which I enjoy. Like they're some of my favorite people because they get what Notre Dame is, how Notre Dame is different, and they don't get too freaked out if they're not winning the national title all the time. But then there's another piece of the Notre Dame fan base that does not care that some of these things are done differently, that the program is put in a position that makes it where it's much more difficult to do what, say, Ohio State or Georgia or Alabama does. And they're like, what's wrong? Why can't they fix this? And it's constant, and you have to calm them down all the time.
Well, I actually think that in Pete, maybe you can confirm or deny this, but I do feel like there are certain fan bases that are more off kilter when it comes to reasonable expectations versus actual program ceiling. And I don't know where Notre Dame stands on that, but it does seem to me like what Andy said of it is a conflicted fan base of 2 different viewpoints. And, all fan bases have varying views of what their program should be or what it could accomplish if things were running at an optimal level. But I do think that it would be an interesting beat to cover because you do have rational expectations or the variations of what you think are rational. Because I think on one hand, somebody who says, well, Notre Dame is different. It has other things that it has to deal with in terms of culture, location, and forced to recruit nationally and all this academic standards, all those things. And you say, hey, you know what? We're always going to be a really good program, but we might not be able to compete with Alabama. But on the other hand, if somebody said if Notre Dame got things rolling the right way and got the right coach, they could use the academic situation as a asset to their recruiting, and they actually could bring in 25 guys a year that fit that description and be a national power. And I think both I could buy.
Yeah, I don't want to go too far down the wormhole with Notre Dame, but it's a place that in some ways is in conflict with itself and always has been. Like, how into football do they want to be if that takes away from the academic side of the university? Those 2 things have to work together, and the pendulum swings back and forth. I mean, I was told, like, the university president, before they built their new indoor, which came online, I think in 2019, he was concerned that, like, okay, what kind of statement are we sending out to the rest of the university about facilities if we're investing in football here, but not the new art institute or the new architecture school? And it's like, what other school in the country is this conversation even being had? You see with NIL, They want to be a participant in NIL, but like do it on their own terms. And then you see what's happening in the SEC with how all in those schools are. Like, just to have the athletic director say, here's our collective, please donate to it. Like, Notre Dame is not to that point yet.
It's sort of like what I always say with Michigan. Like, I don't understand why they don't feel like they can have a kick-ass football program and a kick-ass children's hospital.
Right.
Like, you can have both. You can be all in on both. It's okay. Like, Ohio State is all in on all of it, and it's okay.
Well, that's when he was talking about Notre Dame a second ago, I just was thinking that's exactly what we heard from Michigan for so long. And Michigan is back-to-back Big Ten champions and has made the playoff 2 years in a row. But also Notre Dame has accomplished that in the not too distant past too, where they've made the playoff. So the thing I want to know is, are Michigan and Notre Dame similarly situated as it pertains to what their ceiling is? And do you think there is a second gear? Like, I think if you're good enough to win the Big Ten or good enough to make the playoff multiple times, like both of those programs have done, I think 85% probably of the hard part is already done, right? It's like getting that last 15, 10%. And like, if you get to the 85, is it impossible to get to the 100?
No, I don't think it's impossible. The problem is, I mean, it's kind of loops back to what we were talking about at the beginning. When Alabama sends their plane up and lands in your airport and takes your OC away after they sign Keon Keeley, your 5-star defensive end, who would have been the third highest rated prospect to sign with Notre Dame in like the Rivals 24/7 era after Clausen and Jalen Smith. Like, that makes that last 15% really, really hard. So I think it has more to do with what Georgia and Alabama are doing than what Notre Dame's doing. Like, when Notre Dame has it rolling, covering the 2012 team, I don't think there's a program. I'm not saying this just because I cover Notre Dame. I don't think, you guys can correct me, but like, I don't think there's a program that sucks up as much oxygen nationally.
Oh, 100%. I'll go back to that year, Manti Te'o is a Heisman finalist. Like, he's not a Heisman finalist as a linebacker if he plays anywhere else. Like, and I'm sure now everybody regrets all of that attention, but
that was like the only story in college football that season.
Yes. I mean, Notre Dame is good. Yeah. And I will say, when I throw out Notre Dame or I write a story about Notre Dame, I get so many unsolicited comments like, who cares? And I know you care because you wrote to me. Like, if I wrote the same type of thing about Oklahoma State or Virginia Tech or Ole Miss, you wouldn't say anything. But because it's Notre Dame, you have an opinion.
Yeah, there was. I distinctly remember the day after the Cotton Bowl. It was when Notre Dame got housed by the Trevor Lawrence, T. Higgins, Justin Ross team. Mm-hmm. And I saw Max Olson in the media hotel, and he was like, "Hey, I just clicked on your story. Look, you had 500 comments. That's great." I'm like, I don't know. Have you read any of the comments? Like, people cannot wait to dump on Notre Dame. Which, look, hey, it's great for business because these people are engaged.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
We appreciate you, but. Yeah, everyone has an opinion on them all the time. They suck up so much oxygen, whether they are good or whether they are terrible.
Gentlemen, we have to take a break. When we come back, though, I would like to shift to another plucky little program that doesn't get much attention, the Alabama Crimson Tide. Tommy Rees is headed there as the OC, and Pete is going to tell the Tide folks what they should expect. We'll be right back. I don't want to be a tattletale, but Marcel Dinkins just made me run real fast. Okay, it was an intervals run and it was training day, so I needed to run fast, but that's not how fast I'd normally run if left to my own devices. And that's the whole point. That's what makes Peloton great, is I have somebody telling me to push harder because I can do more, because they know I can do more. It's hard to stick to workouts. It's hard to do it on your own. With Peloton, you have people helping you design the workouts, push you through the workouts, and create this incredible variety. You think it's just the bike, but it's not. It's the bike. It's the tread. It's tread boot camps. It's weight workouts with dumbbells. It's everything you need. It's yoga. You don't even need weights. Everything you need to stay fit or get fit, with people who are willing to help you through what is a very difficult process. You don't have to be a super athlete to join Peloton, because they can help you get there. And then once you get there, they can keep pushing you. So try Peloton risk-free for a 30-day home trial, new members only. It's not available in remote locations. You can see additional terms at onepeloton.com/home-trial. That's onepeloton.com/home-trial. Give it a shot. You're going to love it. Welcome back. So Tommy Rees leaves Notre Dame on that lovely plane that Alabama sent up, which, by the way, Pete, your picture from the airport of the Alabama plane reminded me of the TV station in Salt Lake City tracking the Notre Dame plane as they went to interview Urban Meyer in 2004. Like, I never, like, plane tracking season never gets old to me.
I love a good stakeout.
So, but Tommy Rees headed to Alabama, and this was a case where, and we've discussed this on the show quite a bit, like Nick Saban wants you to come in and run Alabama's offense. He does not want, he appreciates your previous experience, but he doesn't want you bringing your offense whole cloth. He's going to say, here's what we do. You're going to learn our terminology. You're going to teach this way. But the thing is, that offense is so broad, it can be kind of anything. But Tommy Rees seems like he's the type of person who fits what Nick was looking for.
I think in a lot of ways, it's like an updated version of maybe who they were offensively when they whipped Notre Dame in the BCS title game.
AJ McCarron days, yeah.
Where it's like, this is built around the run. It's built around an NFL-style offensive line. Rees is very multiple with how he uses tight ends, which not a lot of people do well. And it's not just Michael Mayer. I mean, they've had more tight ends drafted out of Notre Dame or playing in the NFL than they've had wide receivers over the last 5 years. He knows how to get those kids that position developed, and it's a real pain to deal with because not a lot of people do a good job of it. So a lot of motions, a lot of shifts. I think it's very NFL style in terms of how Rees likes to run it. The demands he puts on the quarterback. I think my big question down there is like, how does he make it work with a first-year starting quarterback, assuming they don't get somebody late in the portal? And then how did he adapt to a place where, I mean, I remember reading some stuff on Bill O'Brien, and they were averaging 40 points a game. And it was like, well, he's got to go. Only 40 points a game.
They were ready for that to end.
Man, that is a different statistical expectation than what Rees has operated under his entire life. So that's going to be a big adjustment as well.
Yeah, they were going to have to discover, and look, they've been recruiting well enough that they should have it on the roster, but they didn't have a lot of difference-making receivers last year at Alabama. And I think that was the frustration. And it's a little unfair because they had just had this incredible bounty of unbelievable receivers for several years, like really going back to when they signed Jalen Waddle and Devontae.
Probably would have liked to average it out a little bit, huh?
Yeah.
Instead of having 5 of them on the roster, at this 5 number 1 receivers in the NFL on the roster at the same time.
It's a little unfair. A little unfair. But how do you see Rees working with Saban? I mean, he's worked with Brian Kelly, but he's, if you think about it, he's not really worked with a lot of other people. This is pretty limited experience here.
Yeah, I mean, his professional sort of connections outside of Brian Kelly or Nick Sirianni in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was with Pat Fitzgerald for a season at Northwestern. That's it. So it's interesting to me because talking to sources on this, like Georgia and Alabama were the 2 places Rees wanted to go if he was going to stay in college. Because that's like the Nick Saban finishing school. Either you're working for Saban or you're working for Saban 2.0. Can we say that with Kirby?
Oh, we can say that.
Okay,
yeah.
All right. You're getting that same level of professional development. I think that if Tommy had gone to LSU with Brian Kelly a year ago, it would have been same job, new place. Staying at Notre Dame let him sort of branch out a little bit, where he had more autonomy under Marcus Freeman. To now go to work for Saban, I think that's sort of the last step in either you're going to be a Power 5 head coach or you're going to be an NFL coordinator, usually within 2 years, maybe less. So I give Rees some credit because like he had a job at Notre Dame for as long as he wanted it. And you go to Alabama, the clock's ticking the second you hit the ground.
So what do you think his end game ultimately is? Would he like to be in the NFL? Would he like to be a Power 5 head coach? Where does this go?
I think that highly likely NFL coordinator before Power 5 head coach. I think he's open to either, but he is much more of an all ball all the time guy. He does not like dealing with media a whole lot. I think he's sort of learning how to process media criticism and not let it eat him up. I mean, he
won't have to deal with it at Alabama.
Yeah,
that's talking to him. He'll be criticized a lot, but he won't have to talk to him.
The guy takes slights very seriously, and he finds motivation in it. But I think ultimately his future is in the pros. I think that could be kind of quick, depending on how things go at Alabama. But ultimately, I think an NFL OC job is probably the spot he wants to be.
Well, Bill O'Brien had obviously been one before and been an NFL head coach, but Brian Dable did 1 year at Alabama, went from NFL tight ends coach to NFL OC after the year as Alabama's OC, and now you see where he is. So I think it's a pretty smart move. If that's the goal, then you do well there, and that will be your next stop.
I don't want to steer the conversation in a different direction, but maybe I do.
Yeah, you do.
I have a question, because I haven't talked to Pete since the season ended and since signing day and the 5-star, the Bowen fiasco and all this stuff. Like, obviously this is going to be a very important hire for Notre Dame. There's no question. And whoever gets hired is probably going to be propped up for a lot of success early on.
I'll just say this is the most important hire Marcus Freeman will make. However long he's at Notre Dame, this is the most important hire.
Yeah.
This is Dabo hiring Brent Venables. If we're looking at it, the guy on the other side of the ball from what you do, who might change everything. That's what that is.
Are you on board with it or not? I mean, talking to people that know Marcus well, I think that he's treating it that way as well.
But it's the perfect segue to what I was going to say is A, how do you think Marcus did his first year just generally? And B, as it pertains to this hire and what he wants to do with the offensive talent and the ability to score at a high level, probably more than 25 points a game, what avenue or what route, do you think would be most effective from a recruiting standpoint? Do you think that NFL down that you were talking about helps? And like, how much of that do you think is all part of this thought process as well?
I think that Freeman's first year was uneven. He ended it on a make. But man, the lows, particularly the Stanford game midseason, was awful. That's like, you only get a few mulligans on that kind of stuff. Recruiting, I thought he did a good job. Definitely from, our Slack messages where you would continually refer to as the best class in Notre Dame history. I'd be like, Ari, okay, like Notre Dame was recruiting under Lou Holtz. This isn't the best class in Notre Dame history, but
they didn't have 24/7 at the time to market.
But I think I did say
Jerome Bettis and Aaron Taylor and Bryant Young in one class, and like
those guys weren't that good.
Yeah.
When I say best of all time, I got to do a better job of specifying just the internet era. But go ahead.
Yeah, all time in Notre Dame, those things go together. That's a long time in Notre Dame. But I'd say
the 41 class was savage.
Oh, they killed it. I would say that recruiting, they learned some pretty harsh lessons with Keon Keeley, Peyton Bowen, Dante Moore to another. He was a silent commit to them for a while. But I mean, some of that is getting your NIL stuff figured out, which is Notre Dame is a ways from that. But I think also and I think you guys maybe touched on this in the Rashad episodes. You got to identify the kids where NIL is their first priority, because that's probably not the kid you're going to get at Notre Dame. If it's your third or fourth, that's fine. Like CJ Carr, he was interested in NIL stuff. I mean, he saw what was going on with Nico and all those deals, and they looked into it and decided, you know what, that's not our first priority. Like Notre Dame needs to find those kids. It's just a different level of recruiting and evaluation of like what's important to you. And it's on you as a head coach to figure that out. So that's a lesson I think Notre Dame is sort of learning in real time here. But the way that it ended with Keeley, Bowen, and Moore, like that just expedited, like, you got to get this figured out if you're going to get to that extra 15%. Because
when you say he learned his lesson, it scares me into thinking that there's going to be a smaller pool of Bowen Keeley type players that they're going to go after. And really, what was so exciting to me about the beginning of the Freeman era, and when I was referring to it as the best class since the beginning, since Adam and Eve, was that they had those guys in the fold at that time, and it seemed like they were going to be able to sign, if they could sign 2 or 3 5-stars a year, which I don't think is unreasonable for a place like Notre Dame, that they would be in a very good position to take that next step. But if their lesson results in, well, we can't go after these guys anymore, then that is a departure of what I thought the Freeman era was supposed to represent.
The money up front part is hard for Notre Dame. They're not getting to that point. So they need to find guys that you can then go to say, hey, Kyle Hamilton, 6-7 figures, Michael Mayer, 7 figures.
The back end money is huge if you're good at Notre Dame. That's the thing that they've got to have somebody blow up that can be the demonstration. And Michael Mayer and Kyle Hamilton are good examples now, but they need somebody like a Bryce Young situation to
chicken or the egg, huh?
Right. So they can say, look at what you get by being a star at Notre Dame.
Well, it's like Tyler Buckner, my understanding, did really well in NIL stuff. He started 3 games. So you just need to be the guy before the season starts. And then that takes care of itself.
Well, CJ Carr might be a perfect representation of what they might need if it goes well with him.
There's no doubt. I mean, I think Sam Hartman, for just being here a year, is like, that world of NIL is completely different in Notre Dame than it was at Wake Forest.
Somebody needs to rent that kid a Ferrari and have him be seen driving up to the football.
Sam's a Ferrari guy.
I want them to have like that old like Wake Forest Model T or whatever they drive around.
But I do think, I mean, Sam sounds like got a decent deal, but did not take the highest deal he could take.
Yeah.
To go to Notre Dame. Like there were bigger offers.
I think Notre Dame, and I understand, like, they don't sort of view themselves as like they need to be the highest bidder. Like, they're not trying to get in the same sandbox as Tennessee and A&M and Oregon and Miami, and they're okay with that. But when you find a guy who NIL is like, this is my third option, can you give me some options here that are competitive? Then, like, okay, I still want the degree, I want the development, I want to be part of this network, all that, the typical recruiting stuff.
Yeah.
You just gotta, I mean, when I talk to Notre Dame coaches about it, and I say, like, well, what do you guys want from NIL? It's like, they just need it to be an option. Like, they got to have something that they can bring and say, like, when you come to Notre Dame, this is what's available to you.
But that's the thing. They need to lean into the post initial success piece of it, because it can be a monster for the right players at Notre Dame. Like, they need to sell the hell out of that. But the problem right now is you're still kind of mostly selling dreams. Like, Alabama has what happened with Will Anderson and Bryce Young, that they can say, look, this happened. Notre Dame needs somebody to be great. Like, if Sam Hartman blows up this year and it's a boon to him financially, then they've got it. And here's the thing: if he blows up, that means his receivers are going to get famous and popular.
Right.
That helps too.
Football people want to watch, that people want to invest in it for an NIL person. Like, I mean, Notre Dame's, they go into the season, their most marketable player, like marketable air quotes, is Joe Alter, left tackle. Like, that's whatever. Like, this is one of the 5 years ago.
Yeah, this is one of the few schools where if you are good there, you are legitimately famous.
Yeah,
like,
that's true.
It's not. This is not a slight to other schools, but there aren't many in that category. Notre Dame, USC, Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, maybe LSU, Penn State, maybe. Like, there just aren't that many schools that can do this. But Notre Dame can do it probably better than anyone if they're willing to lean into it.
Notre Dame is Jay-Z, I thought.
Yeah, right? I mean,
are they Jay-Z or not? You don't think Jay-Z got his bag?
How Marcus Freeman would describe it. I think you need people above Marcus Freeman in the Notre Dame hierarchy.
Jay-Z, yeah. I mean, it's like you sell the Jay-Z thing, but it's like maybe Jay-Z after he was already rich. Like, it's like, okay, well, think about all the records he sold and all the stuff that got him his first, he became a billionaire because he was a business genius and put his.
He's not a businessman. He's a business
man.
Yeah.
But he had to have some funds to start with, you know? And it's like, that's like to me, it's like Notre Dame's like, if they're Jay-Z, then you got to figure out a way to get these guys some money very early on and then allow them to cultivate their brand and then use that money to invest.
Or just let them meet Beyonce.
Yeah, or just bring in Beyonce. I don't know. Whatever.
New recruiting coordinator Beyonce. That would do the trick. She'd whip everybody into shape.
I'd play for her.
Well, I do anything she asks me to do. So, all right. Here is we got to get to the part that everybody wanted to get to, though. We've
You know what that reminded me of real quick before you go,
What's that?
Andy? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I always do this to you, but
of course.
did you know that like when you look at YouTube on your phone, if your accounts are connected, that it goes onto other devices?
Yes.
I didn't know that. And I was like watching videos of Margot Robbie because I'm obsessed with her and would do anything that she asked me to do. And Britt was like, why are there 9 Margot Robbie videos on?
Wasn't there a rumor that she was dating a player at Arizona State and Kenny Dillingham retweeted it?
That's what
Which,
started.
by the way, is a great recruiting tool.
Because
right
the internet trend on Twitter where everybody is like, this person's dating Margot Robbie
Yeah.
is what started this. And then my buddy told me that she had this like really cool video of David Blaine doing a magic trick on her.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like a really like crazy video. If you like that, like David Blaine
it wasn't
type
her in
stuff.
a bathtub explaining.
No.
Swaps.
No, my Margot Robbie.
You haven't seen that movie?
What's that?
The Big Short.
Oh yeah. No, but I'm trying to say though that my Margot Robbie search history in YouTube wasn't sinister. You know, I don't really think that
your wife saw
YouTube
it
is the
anyway.
place, but my wife saw it. And she goes, "Why did you keep searching for Margot Robbie?" And I just said, "Listen, if she were in the room right now, I would pretend like I didn't know you."
Wow.
Well, hey, you gotta be honest, okay? You know, she likes
you
her
have your
celebrities.
laminated card, right? You both have your laminated card.
Of like one, like it's the hall pass.
Yeah, who you're allowed. Yeah.
Yeah, she knows
And it
Margot
doesn't
Robbie
count.
would be my choice. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, it's good that you guys have it arranged and have figured it out. Like,
Yeah, I just don't think that she's really that worried about it. You know,
yeah. Like
she's
more worried.
far more likely to be able to use her fall pass than I am.
I'm more
Yeah.
worried about Jason Momoa than my wife is about Gal Gadot. Let's put it that
exactly.
way.
Yeah.
So, all right. We now get to the best part of the show that apparently is going to be every show now.
Which is much closer to pornography than Margot Robbie ever could
That's
be.
right. Brian Ferentz's new contract. So, amended contract. And as the details start to come out on Monday, I'm just like, okay. He loses $50,000 a year. Okay, 25 points a game. Nicole asked the great question. Nicole Auerbach on Twitter, she asked, does that also include defensive scores? Because
It does, right?
It does. Richard Johnson from Sports Illustrated got clarification from Iowa on that. So they must average 25 points a game, which I believe would put them at number 85 this past season.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So they also must win 7 games or more than 7 games.
I think it's 7 or more.
7 or more. So, and that includes the bowl game. So they don't have to go 7-5. They could go 6-6.
It could be rephrased as become bowl eligible.
This is going to be the Thunderdome, and it is going to be amazing for the same reason that I talked about. But well, okay, I should get to the part that really matters. So I'm sorry I skipped that. If both of those conditions have to be met, if either one of those conditions are not met, Brian Ferentz's contract terminates on June whatever 2024. If they're both met, it extends. If they're not met, it terminates.
The word terminates is so fun. So he's
This
just
is a
fired.
loser leave town match of a contract.
Well, I mean, listen.
The scenarios are endless here. It's just, I mean, okay. So let's say Iowa, their offense muddling as always.
Yeah,
They go to the Big Ten championship game and get blown out by Ohio State 49-0. Are you going to get it terminated because you won the Big Ten West, but had to play in the Big Ten championship game?
the conditions are the conditions, Pete. No, it's a contract. You can always renegotiate, but this is what's so amazing to me, because Pete, what we were talking about the other day, what made Iowa's ineptitude on offense so fascinating to me in 2022 was how good Iowa was on defense. They were absolutely elite on defense. I don't think I would have been nearly as interested in how bad their offense was if their defense had just been average.
That was a big part of it. I just imagine, like, so let's say Phil Parker gets another job. Like, is Brian Ferentz screwed at that point? Like,
right. Now, Miami didn't hire him. They hired Lance Guidry. So I think Phil Parker's safe and he's not going anywhere. But man, if I'm Phil Parker, I'm holding that over Brian Ferentz's head every day. Like, I'm making him wash my car.
Most interesting about this scenario is that we, as consumers of the sport, have a actual data-driven metric to grade him against.
I want to watch every game now.
So, like, every single time they fail to score 25 points, it's like, I feel like if Iowa doesn't score 25 points in a game, he's a failure. Like, that's the number. But also, too, if you go and you look at the statistics, you said it would be the 85th best offense last year in scoring offense. And also, when's the last time Iowa didn't qualify for a bowl?
Right.
So basically what those metrics are, or what those, contract pillars are stating is just be a human being who breathes.
They only averaged 17.7 points this year, and that's including all those defensive scores.
But it literally cannot get worse. So also, too, their defensive scoring
can get worse.
Yeah. Totally.
I don't know if it could get worse than that.
If their defense is worse, the opponents will hold the ball for longer. They will have the ball for less time.
And that field position will suffer too. Yeah,
rotates out. There's no Michigan. There's no Ohio State. So that helps. But, I mean, they scored 30 points in a game once last season. One time.
Rutgers.
It was Northwestern.
Oh, was it Northwestern? They scored. They hit the over against Rutgers.
I tweeted this after the contract details were coming out, and you guys are both married, so you get it. I have a laundry list of things that I have to accomplish every single day. Like, I have to go put the crock pot together right after this. I've got to go to Target and pick some stuff up. Like, I have 10 or 15 around the house errands that I have to accomplish on a given day. Being an adult. Being an adult, which I had never been until I was 32. This is the wife equivalent of being, sweetie, your expectations for the next week are to flush the toilet and put the seat down and take the garbage out. And then if you do those two things, you pass your expectations. Like, this is the football equivalent of the bare minimum. Like, if you can't even... He
didn't flush the toilet or take the garbage out last year.
No, I know.
He left a giant steaming turd in the bowl.
So if the man cannot manage to learn how to flush the toilet, then we are in a situation.
It's the Thunderdome. Like, every game we're going to be watching. And the question is, do you try to run up the score on, say, Utah State?
You have to.
Or Western Michigan?
Oh, God, yes. You have. Yeah,
it's going to put 70 points up. I honestly don't think that Iowa last year could have run the score up on anybody.
No. And then it's pure Thunderdome.
The fact that they were able
to game. Look, what if he's sitting at like an average of 23.5 points a game going into the Nebraska game, and they're 5-6.
Do you know what I want more than anything? I want Iowa to be 8-0 and averaging 11 points a game.
Amazing. That'll be incredible.
Because like that's like the more likely thing, but like honestly, like your contract terminates if you can't flush the toilet. That's basically what that says.
It is the most interesting contract in the history of college football, I think. Man,
I mean, it makes like if I was a programmer at the Big Ten Network, I would have written this contract for Iowa and said, like, this is what you need to give him. Like, we need some more subscribers here.
Oh my God, I can't. I want a running graphic of Iowa's average points per game on the screen during every game.
There's got to be an Iowa fan that's going to take out a billboard, right? That's going to track.
Our guy Vaughn, one of our most dedicated listener / viewers, he watches us while he's on the tractor on his farm in Iowa. I bet he'll do it.
So here's the thing I'm looking at their schedule next year.
And Vaughn chimes in, we won a game 7-3 and didn't score a touchdown. That was against the FCS national champs.
Yeah,
so you got that going for you.
Iowa's schedule next year. Okay, Utah State, they should be able to score some. But then you get Iowa State, which is a rock'em sock'em, low-scoring game every year.
Cox not letting you get 25 on him.
Then they're
he's like, you're not extending your contract on me, sir.
They don't even get out of September without Iowa State, a road trip to Penn State, and a home game against Michigan State, which, even when Iowa's offensively good, are those slogfest type defensive battles that are, 17-10 or 17-4. Like, those are the types of games where things are optimal.
We have no idea what Michigan State's going to be this
year. But there's no way that he is going to be averaging, right, 25 points through the first month of the season.
No,
because of just with the way that the schedule sets up. So the fact of the matter is that we might get into November and they might be averaging like 22.9 points per game going into like the most important month of the year.
Here you go. The Northwestern game is at Wrigley Field. So
there's another, take that off the board.
Field issues, grass issues. The wind's probably going to be blowing 700 miles an hour.
Then in mid-October, they go to Wisconsin. I don't see a game here where it's like they could score. Like if Iowa's in a position right now, they close the year out at Nebraska. They play Illinois, who's much improved. So like if they are in a position where they can run the score up against somebody, I would say that's an improvement from last year, because last year they just couldn't do it.
Can you imagine if you're Phil Parker and you're just sick of all this by the end of the season? Like in the last few games, don't you just tell your DBs like, hey, if you pick a pass off, if you intercept a pass, just take a knee. We're gonna make them score. Like we're not gonna go score for them.
Just a protest.
Yeah, there's nothing on the schedule that is like really bad. Like Notre Dame, they run up the score on New Mexico or Bowling Green. I don't know who Iowa could even attempt to.
Western Michigan a possibility? That's the only one I can think of.
What happens too is if they play Western,
not terrible.
They play Western Michigan and they score 56 points against a team like that, and then average 14 points a game in Big Ten play. Is that like good enough?
Like, come on.
Yeah. It should be averaging 25 points per game in Big Ten play, which he definitely can't do.
I just feel bad for Scott Docterman.
I don't.
I think he's. I think
this is incredible content.
I mean, honestly, you could keep a running score like the Brian Ferentz scoreboard.
Yes,
every week.
Every week you post a story that says, "Here is what Iowa is averaging in scoring right now, and here's how
And here's what went right, here's what went wrong, and how likely it is that they'll be able to improve that.
325 points.
I mean, I want it on the screen for every game. And as soon as they score, assuming the defense intercepts a pass and runs it in, like I want to see the numbers change.
Iowa's defense averaged 3.5 points a game last year.
So the offense averaged 14.4.
You just fill it in, like you get up to the 325 points, 25 points a game times 13. Like there needs to be a big display of that on every Iowa broadcast.
This is why Pete covers Notre Dame for us. He actually did that in his head, Ari, and it's correct.
I don't even know what he's talking about.
He's talking about to average 25 a game over 13 games, you'd have to score 325 points.
Oh yeah, so he figured out that this is a bad math podcast. Pete. We're not going to be showed up on our own show. Okay,
we can do it like darts, where it just counts down from 325.
I do that too. Like I
should create a poster.
Game like on the. That's how I want it displayed during the Iowa season.
Yes.
325.
Yes, you just have a countdown in the corner of the screen.
Yeah.
Season opener starts at 325. It just drops with every point they score.
And I think that we should come up with something on the podcast where every point Iowa scores, we have to do something. So throughout the entire year, like the Andy Staples show will be the official point counter.
Yes.
Of Iowa football and where they're going.
Yeah, I don't think it's not going to be like the Duck doing push-ups at Oregon.
Should it be ounces of alcohol?
I'm not worried about alcohol poisoning if that's the case.
No. Yeah. 4 months to get to 325.
49 ounces of alcohol, I guess, is
48 ounces is four beers. You can drink that during one football game and feel just fine.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe it's 6 drinks per point.
We'll come up with something. It probably won't be that irresponsible. We will come up with something somewhat irresponsible, but possibly for charity. Let's think about it in that.
Always for charity.
So, guys, I don't know what Brian Ferentz is going to bring us next. I thought when Kirk said that he anticipated no staff changes, that was going to be the highlight of the week. This is the gift that keeps on giving. So I can't wait. Pete, enjoy the drama at Notre Dame. I'm sure they're going to hire an OC between now and when this drops as a podcast, because that's how it works. But it's been a pleasure.
Always. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, love talking to you, Pete.